Okanagan Territory. And I'm really excited to get to share some of our knowledge about bats and our questions about bats and things that you might be able to do all over the province. BC is a really rich home for bats. We have more kinds of bats in BC than anywhere else in Canada. And here in the Okanagan, I'm the coordinator for the whole Okanagan region. We have 15 of the 16 bats that are found in British Columbia in this region. So it is a really biodiverse set of bats. Curious, does anyone know what kind of animal a bat is? Is it a fish? Is it an insect? What kind of
Um,
animal is a bat?
I think it's a mammal.
Very good. It's a mammal. We'll talk more about the things that make bats mammals. But bats are actually the broadest type of mammal. There's over 1,300 different kinds of bats known around the world, which is more than any other kind of mammal. They're really fascinating animals. And we'll learn just a little bit about what we can do for them today. So up here I have just a collection of some of the types of bats that we'll find in British Columbia. These are some of the more common ones. We have Western small-footed bats, which tend to be fairly light colored with dark ears and dark noses and dark wingtips. They're very adorable. We have Western, sorry, that was my Western small-footed. This is the little brown bat right here. And again, they're little, they're brown. They can be light brown or dark brown. A lot of people, when they see them, think they're babies because they're actually only about that big. Their wingspan is about that wide when they spread out those wings. But if you've seen a bat flying around near your home, it was likely a little brown bat or a Yuma myotis, which is very similar and looks about the same. And I can't tell the difference between them myself, and most bat biologists can't even. We have other bats around that are really interesting looking. This is the long-eared bat. You can guess how it got its name. And you can see the little antenna that it has inside its ear that let it hear. We'll talk more about what those are for in a little while. We have silver-tipped bats. We have hoary bats. We have pallid bats. We have red bats. This one is called a Townsend's big ear bat. And these ears right here, it can curl them up like the horns of a bighorn sheep and tuck them away on the sides of its head, kind of like Princess Leia, little buns on the side of its head so that it can fit into very small spaces. In fact, if a grown-up holds out their thumb and can fit their thumb in a hole, a bat can probably fit in it. So there may be bats living in tree crevices or in human structures around you that you didn't even know about. As we go through learning about the bats today, please don't be shy about popping any questions that you have into the chat. I don't want to go too fast, but I also want to make sure that we get through a lot of stuff. So stop me if you have questions. I am really not at all bothered by changing the subject and then coming back to where I was, so don't be shy. And with that, we're going to launch into learning a little bit more about these really fascinating mammals. Assuming that my slides go forward. There we go. So this right here looks a bit like a dinosaur, eh? But it is a bat skeleton, a fossil bat skeleton that is a few million years old. Chiroptera, the order that bats are in, has been around for a long while. And they're the only extant, that means still living, flying mammal in the world. We'll look more at their body structure in a little while, but the reason that they can fly is that they have very thin bones. So if, God forbid, your cat ever gets a hold of a bat, even if the bat survives, they often can never fly again because those bones are so thin that they snap fairly easily. And they also have these huge fingers that they stretch their wings out between. They're mammals like us. I love this picture. It's not a BC bat, but this is a flying fox, a larger bat. They're fruit eaters. And when they go to sleep, just like our bats in BC, they wrap themselves up in their wings to keep warm. Because what sets mammals apart from other bats is that they're warm-blooded, which means that we make our own energy inside our body. And we have fur. These two bats right here are BC bats. This is a western red bat and a hoary bat. Hoary means frosty because it has the kind of frosty tips on its fur here. And these are other bats from around the world that I included pictures of just because they're really interesting bits of fur. The fur can have patterns on it. It can spring up in places like under their armpits to help them stay warm. It can be interesting colors and decorations like this bat that seems to have a mohawk. And it can even help outline their features like this flying fox that has orangey fur around its eyes. The other thing that sets mammals aside from other animals is that mammals give birth to live young and feed them milk. This is a mama little brown bat and her baby. And the baby uses its thumbs, which it will later use in life, to climb things, to hold on to its mama, and mama can wrap it up in her wing. They're very convenient, those wings are. When the babies are born, they are tiny. This is one of the things that we're going to learn about in terms of the needs of bats, is that mama bats live in maternity colonies with their babies, and they help care for each other's babies. Because when those babies are born, they're helpless. They're wee tiny. This is a grown-up's finger that you can see the baby bat clinging to. When they're born, they're about the size of a large bean, and they grow to full size in 3 to 6 weeks. After that, after they've grown to full size, they're able to get out. But until then, they can't fly. They can cling to their mother and to the walls of the roost. So this time of year in early June, mama bats are either pregnant and soon, that's the name for a baby bat. And the pups are living in the maternity colony with their mama and with all the other mamas. They can't fly, and those maternity colonies really do need to be protected. This is a red bat with twins. Bats are a lot like humans in that twins are a little uncommon, but they do happen. And single babies are more common. So now we've been through kind of a review of bats being mammals and what sets them aside as mammals. Does anyone have any questions? Anything you want to throw out? I'll pause, and then if you have anything that you want to pop into the chat, you are welcome to do that. Go ahead.
I heard that when a bat has twins,
yeah,
like only it'll raise one of them and not the other.
So what more likely happens is that the birth mama raises one baby and another mama in the colony raises the other baby. Let me see if I have, yep, here we go. The next slide, can anybody recognize what this is?
That's a mom and a lot of babies.
Is this babysitting?
This is babysitting, exactly.
That bat's a babysitter?
That bat's a babysitter. This is babysitter bat, likely a older female who doesn't have babies of her own, and all of these pink bumps are baby bats clinging to the wall of the roost. And babysitter bat hangs out with the babies, helps take care of them, chase off any intruders, while all the mamas go out and get their food, because it takes a lot of calories to help a little critter grow to full size in 6 weeks. And so mamas all go out, get the food that they need while babysitter bat hangs with everybody. And when the mamas come back, only actually about 80% of them find their baby. They use their sense of smell to find their baby, and they're not right all the time. But that's okay, because that's part of the maternity colony, is they care for each other's babies. So in the case of those twin bats, probably some other mama bat whose baby didn't make it would raise that other one. There's adoption that takes place within bats. It's not formal like with people with paperwork and everything. But the mama bats in the maternity colony help make sure that the baby bats all have the best chance of survival, which includes babysitting and includes, if there's a baby that's saying, I'm hungry, you just feed the baby, even if it's not yours. Does that kind of make sense? We seem good? Yeah, they are so cool. All right, so bats are mammals, and we don't seem to want to be going forward. The order that bats are in is called Chiroptera, which means chiro is bone and ptera is flyer. So a chiropractor works on your bones, and a pterodactyl was a flying dinosaur. So it means bone flyer. And you can see why in this picture that was taken of a bat looking up at the bright sky behind it. You can see its upper arm, its lower arm, there's its wrist, there's its pinky, its ringy, its middle, its pointer, and its thumb. And if you compare it to a human and a bird, birds also have elongated bones, but you notice that the bones don't look much like the bats. We've got 5 fingers, bats got 5 fingers. We have lots of joints in the outer portion of our finger, so does the bat. Different from the birds. And that's because between bats and us. So now that we know about our bats and how they're mammals, we can start thinking about the environment that they need. All of our bats here, we're just talking about British Columbia bats right now, eat one single type of food. Can anybody tell us what it is? Pop on the chat or unmute yourself.
It is
Insects?
Somebody said bugs, somebody said insects, mosquitoes, yes. They all eat insects and arachnids, so spiders, tiny invertebrates with exoskeletons. One little brown bat can eat 6,000 mosquitoes in a night. Thank you, little brown bat. Thank you, little brown bat. And I run an orchard. I could turn my camera and show you my apple trees outside. So I love having the bats around. There are moths that are problematic for orchards and for vineyards. Bats eat them. And so it is wonderful to have them around. They're a big help to agriculture in our ecosystem. They find their bugs. I'd like everybody to get up out of your seat, because sitting still for too long is not that terribly fun. And do a quick run around your room and imagine suddenly that the lights were turned off. Would you bump into things? It would be really difficult to see where you're going. And that's the situation that bats find themselves in, is they're flying around, they're moving pretty quickly, but it's dark. So they use something called echolocation to figure out where they're going. And I have a little bit of sound for you. Make sure that the sound's up nice and loud on your computer. We are going to listen to the sound that the bat makes. I had it up. Let's get it back. Here we go. Those clicks go out just like the yellow dots or yellow lines in this drawing. They bounce off of something, which might be a moth, might be the side of a building, it might be some sticks in a tree. And when they bounce back, the bats can use their ears to hear exactly where that sound was coming from and change their behavior, whether it's flying toward it if it's prey or away from it if it's a building, to get where they need to go. This video is of a bat catching a moth. So as the bat flies along, listen closely to what the bat does. Did the click stay the same? The clicks?
The clicks that they bounced back after the first click. It was like it bounced off I think the moth, and the bat heard the sound too, and it knew that there was something there that it could catch, so it went down and caught the moth.
Yeah, so the bat flies toward the moth. You may also notice the clicks speeding up. And they speed up so that the bat can figure out exactly where that moth is before it scoops it up with its tail and passes it up to its own mouth. Did you also notice that this bat made a different pattern of clicks than the other bat? Each kind of bat makes a different pattern of clicks, and that's actually how bat biologists can tell them apart. I mentioned that bat biologists really, by sight, can't tell the difference between a Yuma bat and a little brown bat. We have to use the pattern of clicks that they make when they're doing echolocation. So there's actually a group in Summerland right now that's working on turning it into a bat-friendly community that is doing a survey to figure out what kinds of bats we have around, and we're using their different patterns of echolocation to realize what kind of bats are around. So our bats everywhere use their ears to catch the sound that comes back. This is one of our BC bats. This is the spotted bat. Has big ears, just like a satellite dish. Other ears, like the Townsend's big ear bat that we talked about that could curl its ears back up, also have really large ears. Other ones have smaller ears. This is a pallid bat. This is the western small-footed bat. You can just barely see its little black ear right there. It is the smallest bat in BC. This is a little bit of a transition point where we're going from talking about the bodies of the bats to more about what they need in their environment around them. So does anyone have questions? I'll pause for a minute, make sure that we all had a chance to have any questions we have addressed.
Why are bats so small?
Why are they so small? That's a great question. And it all has to do with how they get around. They have to fly. And beating your wings to keep your body up in the air is really tricky. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm a pretty short human, which means that when I stretch my arms out side to side, you can't see it all the way now, but it's about 5 feet across. The largest bat in the world has about a 6-foot wingspan, so wider than my arms spread out. But that bat only weighs about 6 kilos. That's a lot less than my baby son, because it takes a lot of energy to lift a body into the air. So most bats, bug-eating bats are called microbats, and that in general they're smaller than fruit-eating bats, which we don't have around here, which are called megabats. But microbats tend to be the smallest ones in the world, have a wingspan about that big. And the smallest ones in BC have a wingspan about that big. The biggest ones in BC have a wingspan about that big, just because it's difficult to keep your body in the air just by flapping wings. So they're limited by the size of their wings and by how much energy they can get for flapping to keep themselves up in the air. Fruit is more energy dense, and fruit is also a lot easier. 6 kilos in pounds is about 13 pounds. Yes, thank you, Julia.
Is
Go
is
ahead.
the western small-footed bat like a microbat?
Yeah, all of our BC bats are microbats.
All of them?
And Julia, to answer your question, fruit is more energy dense, which is why fruit eaters can be bigger. It also takes less energy to catch a date than it does to catch a moth. Because to catch a moth, you have to chase it and you have to scoop it out of the air and eat while you're on the move. Whereas to catch a date, you have to sniff, find the tree, fly over to it, and then hang upside down while you stuff your face. So it's a combination of the energy required to catch the food and the energy density of the food itself. Really good questions that everybody is asking. I love it. So transitioning a bit more into the ecology, which means the study of the area around the bats and the environment that the bats are living in. This western small-footed bat, you might notice, is squished between two pieces of rock. And most of our BC bats like to live in natural crevices. They might be rock crevices, or they might be crevices in, say, a cottonwood. But of the species in British Columbia, 12 of them are crevice dwellers that don't live in buildings. 4 of them will live in human structures. And in terms of numbers, most of them are in those 4 species, because the little brown bats and Yuma myotis are really happy living in structures. That's where a lot of them live these days. But most of our bat species won't move into a bat box or into an old barn or up under the eaves of somebody's house. And so that means that we really do need to protect the trees and the natural habitat that they need for their roosts in order.
Bat lives in a building. What kinds of bats live in buildings?
So why haven't I seen any bats around where I live? Because I haven't seen one.
So a couple of questions. One of them is, what kind of bats live in buildings? So the 4 that we find in buildings are little brown bats, Yuma myotis, big brown bats, and Thompson's big ear. Townsend's big ear. Those are the 4 that will live in buildings. And let's see, did I have one other on here that was about types in buildings? Yeah, those are the 4 that will live in bat boxes. And for the big brown bats, the traditional bat boxes can be a little bit challenging. They can squeeze in, but the slots that you need to make for little browns and Yumas, which are the most common by number, are a lot smaller than what the big browns need. So it can be a little bit of a challenge there. The other question of why haven't you seen bats around? There can be a lot of reasons. So all animals need 3 things to live. They need food, they need water, and they need shelter, right? So sometimes you won't see bats around because you're a little ways from a water source. Sometimes you won't see them around because there aren't good sheltering places for them. They don't have the type of roosts that they need. And sometimes because there isn't enough food to support a large population, you just might not see some. If you want to see bats going out near water, fresh water, not salt water, during just after dusk is a great time to see them. And we'll talk a little bit more later about where you can look for bats and the BC annual bat count that's going on right now that you might be able to participate in. So looking at our western small-footed that's hiding in its rock crevice right there, which is their favorite place to live, I just wanted to put things in perspective. We were talking about how small they are. This photo that should pop up in a moment has a baby bat in it. Someone was cleaning beans and found a baby bat. Can you see it? If you peer really close and look, can you see it?
I could see a little brown thing peeking out.
Is that the little brown thing right there?
Yeah.
That's a baby bat.
Was it still alive or?
It was not still alive. It had drowned because the beans had been soaking. And we don't really know how the baby bat ended up in someone's pinto beans, or sorry, these are kidney beans. But that is the size of a baby bat. Our biggest bat in BC is the hoary bat, which we had seen a few times. And like I said, that's about the size of a grown-up putting two relaxed hands together. The Western small-footed is about the size of one grown-up hand, not all the way stretched out. And the hoary is two stretched all the way out. So our bats are not big. They need fairly small crevices. And those roosting places, that's a roost is the name for where bats sleep, and they have different roosting needs during the daytime and the nighttime actually. But where they sleep is like that rock crevice. And they love cracks in tree bark. So if you have any ponderosa pines around, I had somebody out in Nelson. You'll have ponderosas nearby. Here in the Okanagan, we have a good number of ponderosas. Cottonwoods also have really kind of craggly bark that bats love. So old growth cottonwoods are extremely important for bats. And they don't have to go very deep. They can just kind of hide themselves under a little bit of a crack where a predator bird won't see them during the daytime. And they curl up and go to sleep very, very happily. So those roosting spots for the day are very important. They're a little less picky about night roosts. And I actually get a lot of questions from people who say, I see bat poop outside my front door, but I never see any bats. That's because the bats roost there at night. So bats, they wake up right around sunset. If you ever go near a good-sized maternity colony right around sunset, it's hilarious. You can imagine them talking to each other. Stretch out their wings. Hey, you bumped me. Because they can make little squeaks that are audible to our ears as they're talking to each other as they wake up. So they wake up, they stretch, they bonk each other, they squabble a little bit. I will talk about the bat poop in a couple moments. They squabble a little bit, and then about 20 minutes after sunset, they'll start swooping out. They'll go gobble up some bugs, and then they'll go find somewhere that they can hang. That's often the stucco side of someone's house, or it's a tree branch, or it's a rough spot on the bark. They're less picky about it because it's dark than they are during the day. And they rest for several hours and they poop a good bit. And that poo, it looks a little bit like mouse droppings, but it's shiny and it has pointy ends. Mouse droppings are usually fairly blunt on the ends. And if you put on rubber gloves, I won't recommend handling any poo with bare hands. Although BC bat species don't carry any diseases that people can get. Elsewhere in the nation, there are fungi that are carried in bat poo that are bad news for humans, but here we don't have that fungus. But if you take a piece of bat poo and you smush it, it will crumble. And you'll see lots of shiny bits because it's made up of insect exoskeletons. It's just the outside of the bugs that the bat was eating. Whereas mouse poo does not crumble. It kind of smushes and it's rather icky. So the poo looks like a lot like mouse poo, but there are ways to differentiate it. So we had our bat. It was hanging there at its night roost and it dropped some poo. And then they go out again just before dawn, eat another meal, and then they go back to their day roost. And that's the maternity colonies, or for boys, they tend to hang out in 1s or 2s or 5s or 6s or a big group.
Minecraft education.
They're bachelor pads, exactly. And they'll hang out there for the day. This is a picture of a maternity colony. These are the Yuma bats at the Peachland Visitor Center. They went to renovate this historic building several years ago, and they discovered that they had thousands of bats living up in the top of the building. And rather than saying, no, we don't want them, they said, wow. And they got a contractor to put down a tarp that they clean off every year because thousands of bats make a lot of bat poo. And the bat poo, which is also called guano, is an amazing fertilizer. So they sell the fertilizer as a fundraiser during the winter time. And they've fully embraced having the cam. If you look for BEEPS, which is the Bat Ecology and Education Project, you can see their live webcam and you can see the bats up in the attic. Let's see. I had one other thing that I wanted to make sure I said about the Peachland bats. Oh, they report their baby bats because they can see in their webcam when the baby bats are born. And so we kind of use them as the record of when the first baby bats are born each year. This is a little boy bat hanging out all by himself in his day roost at one of the elementary schools around Penticton. He was just there right over the office door. And if you're hunting for bats, this is where you may be able to find them. It's just tucked up in the eaves or near the soffits of the house. And they're often really inobtrusive. You won't really notice them. The first sign you'll see is a little pile of guano laying on the ground underneath. And if you see that, then you can start to look around. I haven't seen the bats, which makes me think that it's a night roost, but I find bat guano in one of the sheds on my property. So that makes me very happy. Things that we can do to help bats that are willing to live in human structures is, like they did in Peachland, we can make sure that old buildings stay a good home for them by not excluding them. If you have an attic that has bats in it, you can put down tarping or something to make sure that the guano doesn't spread. You don't want bats in the same living space as humans, but if it's a space that's separate from humans, coexisting them with them is wonderful. They're great mosquito control, they're great moth control, and they don't pose any health threats as long as we don't have direct contact with them. If you don't have a spot on your property like an old barn or an attic that they can live in, you can put up bat boxes. So this is a bat box on the side of a house that someone installed. This is one on a telephone pole. And this is one on the side of a house, but looking up into it. So you can see all these little bats. That's about 1.5 feet, half meter, by about 2.5 feet, so a shy meter, can house 200 or 300 bats, even more if you include their pups in a maternity colony. That guano isn't stinky. It's one of the very nice things about it. You may smell their urine a little bit. It has a ammonia smell like the urine of a lot of mammals does, but that's only if it's somewhere that doesn't have good ventilation. If there's decent ventilation, you won't even smell that. Some people who have stucco siding really don't like the urine because it can leave stains on the stucco. If that's something that you're dealing with, you can contact your regional bat coordinator and you can kind of brainstorm with them about your specific situation. But in all of these cases, the guano is just able to drop out the bottom, and these backboards on the bat houses are built so that they will deflect any urine from the side of the building, or that's the hope. Other things that you can do to help bats is make sure that they have those good winter habitats. In the winter, our bats go and they hang out in rocks and in caves and in mines And we don't actually know the whole story, because if you count up the bats that we can find in the wintertime, it's not nearly as many bats as we know that we have around in the summertime. We know that some of our species, like the silver-haired bat and the hoary bat and the eastern red bat, which does sometimes come this far west, migrate south, but most of them, we're pretty sure, go somewhere up in the hills, usually somewhere with rocks around, to hibernate for the winter. There's evidence coming in based on telemetry, which is little radio emitters that were put on the bats, that some of them may hide in boulder fields. So if anyone has been up over the Crow's Nest and you've seen the giant boulder field next to the Hope Slide, there's probably a good number of bats that go and hibernate in that, because they can get down into the cracks and the crevices, and they just need somewhere that has a constant temperature and fairly high humidity for the winter. So if you find a bat, first thing is, despite what you saw here, don't touch the bat. You want to leave it alone. And grown-ups can call the RAP line or your local community bat program. This 855 number will get you to all of the different areas. It's just a matter of which extension you punch in so that you can report a bat in your local area. There's chaos happening outside my door, please excuse me. And when you let us know about bats, that really helps bat biologists like Tanya, who's one of the folks who works here in the Okanagan, learn about where bats live, how they behave, when they go into hibernation, when they come out of hibernation. There's so many things that we still have to learn about bats. And so every report that we have about bats and bat colonies is just a little bit more information that helps us form a fuller picture. Other things that we can do, I already discussed some of this, is if you know of old trees or old buildings that bats use to roost in, and there's any way that those can stay up, it's great to let them stay up so that the bats don't lose their existing homes. If you have cats, you want to keep them indoors. This was a bad news situation where a cat was outdoors. And catching up on the questions, if you are bitten by a bat, you can get rabies. The chance is very, very low. So if you have direct contact with a bat, whether it's touching it with bare skin, or if for some reason, say the bat flew into your arm, or one of your pets had direct contact with a bat, you want to contact public health or your pet's veterinarian just to make sure everyone is up to date on their vaccinations, because the vaccination for rabies is great as long as you have it. So if you have contact with a bat, your doctor will make sure that you have your vaccination up to date and you'll be in good shape. Same thing with your cats or dogs, is you just need to make sure that they're up to date on their rabies vaccinations, and if they need a booster, they'll get a booster. Most common bat in BC is the little brown bat, and if you have a roofer coming in, they may find little brown bats. And if that happens, have them contact their local bat outreach person to come up with some ideas of how you can still do the re-roofing without bugging the bats. Here we go. You can put up bat boxes if you know you have bats in your area who might be having their habitat disturbed. This is a bat box that went in not far from where I live that now has about 700 bats that live in it. And finally, you can enjoy the bats that visit your home. And I'm looking for, where is it? I know I have a slide, but I'm not finding it. You can participate in your local bat count. So I have more information about the bat counts that I will pop into the chat very, very shortly. But you can enjoy the bats that visit your home. And if you see a bat in the winter time, kind of between November and May, you'll want to let people know that you saw that bat, because that's the time when bats should be hibernating. And if they're out, it might be because they have something called white nose syndrome, which is caused by a fungus. So thank you so much. I hope you learned something about bats. And like I said, I'm going to pull up a list that I have, my notes, with contact information. So the bat counts are really, really amazing ways to learn about bats. What we do is we go out somewhere that we know that a bat is nearby. This is a photo from a bat count. And you basically relax in a chair with a counter and you watch for bats to come out of, it might be a tree, it might be the bottom of an underpass. And you count the bats. You can either tap your screen if you have an app downloaded, or you can use one of the little thumb clickers. And that helps us get an idea of the size of the bat populations. Right now, we are doing bat counts all over the province, and some of the regional coordinators sent me information. If you are interested in counting, I have contact information from Fraser Valley, Thompson Region, Comox Valley, and Southern Vancouver Island. Great question. Hang on, I got the question of how do you know if you're counting the same bat twice? You just count the bats as they come out. Usually during that first rush, when everybody's leaving the roost to go eat, they're not going back in. We have one really complicated site here in our valley where it's a barn that we know that bats come in and out. And so you have somebody counting bats that go in and someone else counting bats that come out, and you subtract the ins from the outs to figure out how many bats you actually had. But most of them are much more simple than that. You just count the bats that are coming out. I put the contact information for those areas where they still need help with bat counts there. If you know about bats that are living near you, like if you have a bat house that has bats in it, or you know someone who has a bat house, or bats under their eaves, or bats in a tree in their backyard, you're welcome to join in the count on your own. Right now I'm posting the instructions for the count and the form that you can fill out and send to your regional bat coordinator. Really enjoyed having everybody here. Someone asked about the slides. If I send the slides to you, Christina, can you put them up on the Nature Kids site?
Absolutely. And also I'll put a link in here right now. We have, last year we've done a citizen science project on bats. And so we have really great resources and games and activities and things on our website as well. So you can check that out.
And something that I haven't even gotten into is that you did the Bat Buddies, yes, last year?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So if you participated in Bat Buddies, that was getting you set up to participate and contribute to this larger bat count information. The question of how could you figure out if your house is a good place for a bat house? You need to be reasonably close to water. And if you're reasonably close to water, you need to have somewhere that you can mount a bat house that is at least, bare minimum is the bottom is 3 meters, or about 9.5, 10 feet off the ground, without things below it. Because if there's brush below it, the bats have a hard time. They can't actually flap their wings to take off. They drop and spread their wings and catch air. So if there's brush below, they may whack the brush before they catch air. So they usually won't live somewhere with brush. So you need a nice clear.
When is this game be done?
We're more or less done. I'm just answering questions right now. If you have a clear area that you can mount something on a pole or on the side of a building, that is absolute best. Sides of trees can work, but we find that bats don't tend to take up residence on the bats of trees. And there are a good number of provincial parks that have bat populations as well. Some of them have bat houses, some of them have old buildings. Someone's mentioning cool places to see bats in the chat right now. Does anyone else have questions? thank you to everyone who joined. If you need to sign off, please feel free to. I hope you have a wonderful day. Get outside, keep your distance, but enjoy being out there. I've really enjoyed getting to tell you a bit about this.
Thank you so much, Ella. We really appreciate you being with us today and telling us all about bats. And there's so many great resources. So if you have questions or want more information, please email us and we can put you in touch with all the answers. For our members, just so you know, we're keeping our online calendar up to date. So if you're ever wondering when the next Virtual Explore Day is going to be, you can find all that information on our website. And if you're not a member and you really enjoyed hanging out with us today, then you can go to our website and learn more about becoming a member with Nature Kids. So thank you so much, Ella. I really appreciate you being with us. And everybody have a great afternoon and stay safe. Go see the sunshine.
And I will pop the Bat Citizen Science link up in our chat. I had that up.
Close the door.
Should we do the
There you go.
Okay.
tutorial? No?
Ask Paul if he's ready.
Oh,
Hey, Paul.
sorry.
Nothing. Maria? You
All
guys
right.
up?
I guess bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. I'll hang out here in case anyone has questions that you want to ask as the group gets a little bit smaller.
Oh, well, they are.
So Marcelo, come learn how to use the
Yeah,
microphone.
yeah. Wait, is audio on?
Yep.
Oh.
Hi, thanks for hosting and the great presentation.
I don't know if they can hear us.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so you got Kate here, who's the regional coordinator in the Thompson area.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
And so yeah, thanks for allowing us to join kind of a lot this morning.
Yeah.
A great presentation.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Do you have any questions?
Um,
Put you on the spot. Okay,
I don't know.
anyway, thanks again.
Yeah.
Have a good Sunday.
You too. Thank you. I'm looking at Lisa's question. So the question was, you have a good place to put up a bat house, but there are predatory cats around. That's challenging. If the cats are outdoor 24/7, meaning around dusk, it's probably not best to be trying to attract bats because it's that dusk time when cats can really prey on them. If your neighbor has the cats just outside during the daytime and they're preying on birds, then that's a problem in and of itself, but not for the bats. So yeah, I probably wouldn't put it up if you know that you have a big predator cat around.
If I could just ask you, can I ask you in person? Then it might.
Yeah, please.
So we have a pretty good relationship with our neighbors, and
Yeah.
if I did talk to them, like they have like mason bees and stuff, like they're pretty interested in as well in natural habitats. And I'm just wondering if I did talk to them, like I feel like I feel like they're gonna let their cats out in the day anyways, but if they did agree during certain hours, like during dusk, to keep their cats indoors.
It's mainly just sunset that there's the most contact between cats and bats, because that's when bats are coming out swooping close to the ground, and cats have such a hard time resisting that small moving thing that's coming close to the ground, and I could bat at it and then it flops and I can bite it. So yeah, if they're willing to keep their cats in around sunset, then you should probably be okay. That's the dangerous time.
Okay, something to consider. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that might be a wrap.
Okay, I think it's
Thanks so much, Elle. I really appreciate hanging out with you this morning.
my pleasure. There's so much we could have chatted about. I hope I did enough to get everyone's appetite whetted.
Exactly.
Have a wonderful Sunday
Cheers, you too. Bye.
for now.